He was supposed to be the one calling for the rescue. But when the helicopters arrived, Sergeant First Class Christopher Celiz became the rescue. Pinned down in Afghanistan, surrounded by gunfire, he made a decision few men ever could. He stepped into the open, shielding his brothers and the medevac crew with his own body. He saved them all, but he never made it home. Before we begin the story of a hero, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what we do here. And let us know in the comments where you are watching from. It is always inspiring to see who is joining us from around the world. Chapter 1. The Making of a Ranger. Born in Summerville, South Carolina, Christopher Celiz grew up like many other American kids, curious, competitive, and always moving. He loved sports, old war movies, and the feeling of being part of a team. But even early on, people noticed something different about him. He took responsibility for everyone around him. Teachers said he was the kind of kid who would defend anyone being picked on, and he had a natural sense of leadership that didn't need words. After high school, he joined the U.S. Army in 2006. He didn't join for glory, he joined because he believed service was the highest form of loyalty. He earned his place in the 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the most elite fighting units in the world. Through brutal training, sleepless nights, and endless drills, Celiz's calm under pressure made him stand out. He wasn't the loudest, he was the one others looked at when things went wrong. By 2018, after multiple deployments to Afghanistan, he had become a seasoned combat engineer and Ranger leader, the man his team trusted when chaos hit. And that trust would soon be tested in ways no one could imagine. Chapter 2. The Mission to Paktia. By July 12, 2018, Afghanistan's mountains burned under the summer sun. The fighting season was in full swing, and the Paktia province, a harsh, rocky land near the Pakistani border, had once again become a battlefield. For the men of the 75th Ranger Regiment, it was another mission in a war that had already lasted a lifetime. Sergeant First Class Christopher Andrew Celiz, 32 years old, stood on the tarmac as helicopters roared overhead. He had been through this routine many times before. He checked his rifle, adjusted his vest, and gave his men that quiet look, the kind that said, "We've got this." He was leading an operation to assist Afghan partner forces in clearing a compound suspected of harboring Taliban fighters. The mission sounded simple on paper: go in, secure the area, get everyone out. But in Afghanistan, nothing was ever simple. They landed just after dawn, rotors chopping through the thin air, the valley below echoing with their descent. Dust swallowed them whole, and then came the gunfire. The Rangers moved quickly, pushing through the village's maze of mud walls and narrow alleys. Celiz was at the front, always at the front. He believed leadership meant being the first in and the last out. The initial contact was heavy but manageable. Then came the ambush. From the hills surrounding the village, Taliban fighters unleashed a wall of gunfire. Machine guns, RPGs, small arms. The air turned into chaos. Bullets tore through the walls. One of the Afghan soldiers went down, then another. Celiz ordered his men to form a perimeter while calling for a medical evacuation, a dust-off. Within minutes, the call came back. A Black Hawk helicopter was en route. But the enemy wasn't done. They shifted fire, concentrating on the open field the medevac would need to land in. Every Ranger knew what that meant. The pilot was about to fly straight into hell. Celiz looked at the wounded men, then at his radio operator. He didn't hesitate. We'll make space. Tell them to come in." The Black Hawk circled low, fighting through tracers and smoke, finally touching down on a patch of dirt, barely large enough for its rotors. Celiz and his men sprinted through gunfire to load the wounded. Rounds cracked past their helmets. Dust exploded around their boots. When the last casualty was aboard, Celiz waved for the pilot to lift off, but then he saw it. The enemy had repositioned, aiming for the helicopter's tail. Without a second thought, he ran toward the line of fire. That S who he was, the kind of leader who stood in the open, so no one else had to. Chapter 3. The Rescue Under Fire. The Black Hawk sat exposed in the open field blades, screaming, dust spiraling like a storm. The pilots could see the rounds ripping through the air, sparks and dirt flying just meters away. Every instinct said to pull up to abort, but Sergeant First Class Christopher Celiz was still out there. He waved his team forward, shouting over the roar of gunfire, "Get them in! Get them on the bird!" Rounds tore through the dirt beside his boots. Celiz didn't duck. He moved faster. He grabbed the first wounded ranger by the vest and pulled him toward the helicopter S-ramp. The crew chief reached out, helping drag the soldier inside. Then another burst of gunfire hit. Celiz pivoted, firing back, laying down cover so the medics could load the second casualty. He wasn't behind cover anymore. He was the cover. To the men on the ground, the scene felt like slow motion. Celiz's figure stood between the enemy and the helicopter, rifle flashing, dirt exploding around him. He yelled for his team to move not to him, but past him. The pilot shouted over the comms, "We're hit, we have to lift now." But Celiz wasn't done. There was still one more man to pull in. He sprinted through open ground, grabbed the soldier's gear, and dragged him up the ramp as bullets sliced the air around them. Then came the shot that changed everything. A burst from the ridgeline hit him. He staggered once, twice, but stayed standing. With one arm clutching his rifle, he turned and waved the helicopter to go. "Go! Go! Go!" The pilot hesitated, seeing him fall to his knees, but Celiz raised his hand again, waving them off, insisting they take flight. He knew what staying meant. He knew what going would cost, and he chose anyway. The Black Hawk lifted, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust. Through the haze, the crew could see him bleeding, weapon still raised, still firing. He kept shooting until the helicopter was safely out of range, and then he fell. When the dust cleared, the valley was silent again. The medevac had made it out. Every wounded soldier was alive. But the man who made that possible, the man who stood between life and death, lay still in the dirt. Hours later, one of his rangers whispered, "He saved us all. He saved everyone." Chapter 4. The Final Flight. When the Black Hawk lifted from the ground, its rotors carved through smoke and chaos. Inside, the medics pressed their hands against the wounds of the soldiers Celiz had saved. The helicopter trembled under the weight of its passengers, men who lived because one man refused to step back. But Christopher Celiz was still on the ground. The Rangers rushed to reach him. He was bleeding heavily, slumped near the edge of the field, his weapon still in his grasp. Even as they carried him to safety, he tried to push them away, urging them to focus on others. "I am fine," he said. "Get them out." He wasn't fine. The medics fought to stop the bleeding as they moved him toward the second helicopter. The air around them was still thick with dust and gunfire, the echo of the battle refusing to fade. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, he looked up at his men, the soldiers he detrained, led, and fought beside for years. They called him Top, the man who always had an answer, the calm voice on the radio when things went bad. Now his voice was weak, fading under the noise of the blades. Still he gave one last order. "Take care of them." The medevac pilot later said he could see the firefight from above the smoke, the flashes, the small figures running in the dust. And in the middle of it all, the man who had made it possible for them to fly away. Celiz was still alive when the helicopter lifted. He gripped the medic's arm, eyes half open, as the green fields below blurred into brown, then into sky. But somewhere along that final flight, his pulse slowed, his breathing softened, and then it stopped. He was 32 years old. When word reached the base, no one spoke for a long time. Then one ranger broke the silence. He stayed so we could leave. Back in the States, his wife, Catherine, received the call no military family ever wants to hear. Her husband, the father, the soldier, the man who never asked for recognition, was gone. At his memorial, soldiers from across the 75th Ranger Regiment lined the road in silence. Their boots clicked in rhythm as the flag-draped casket passed by. Some stood at attention, others bowed their heads, a few simply wept. He had done everything right and given everything he had. For the men under his command, for the medevac crew who made it home, for the mission that needed one last act of courage. And as the final salute echoed through the air, the sound of the Black Hawk S blades returned a reminder of the day he gave everything so that others could fly away alive. Chapter 5. The Legacy of a Ranger. Time has a strange way of softening memories, but not this one, not the memory of Sergeant First Class Christopher A. Celiz, the man who gave his life shielding others. For the Rangers who fought beside him that day in Paktia, his voice still echoes through the static of every radio call. They remember his calm when everything fell apart, the way he never raised his voice even when death was seconds away. One of his soldiers said, "He didn't just lead us, he loved us. That's why he stepped forward when everyone else stayed down." That moment, the instant he turned toward the fire instead of away, has been replayed in the minds of those who lived because of it. The medevac pilots still talk about him. They say that without his decision, the helicopter and everyone inside would never have left the ground. In the years that followed, his name became a lesson in courage. At Fort Benning and Hunter Army Airfield, new Rangers hear the story of the man who wouldn't back down. In EOD and combat engineer training halls, his picture hangs on the wall beside a simple phrase, "He stood in the open." In 2021, President Joe Biden presented the Medal of Honor to his widow, Catherine Celiz, in a quiet, emotional ceremony. She stood with their young daughter, Shannon, holding the medal that represented everything her husband had stood for and everything he had lost. The president said, "He used his body as a shield so that others could live. That is valor not for glory, but for love." For Catherine, it wasn't just a medal. It was a reminder that her husband's final act had meant something, that his name would be spoken with respect, not just by soldiers, but by generations to come. At Ranger Regiment memorials, his name is now carved in granite alongside those who gave everything. Each year on the anniversary of his death, Rangers gather, raise a glass, and repeat the words he used to say before every mission. "We'll make it through. We always do." They didn't that day, but because of him, so many others did. Celiz's story has become a symbol of what it truly means to serve not as a fighter, but as a protector. The kind of soldier who measures success not by victory, but by who he brings home alive. And though his body rests in South Carolina soil, his spirit lives in every soldier who steps into danger and says, "Ivy got you." Because that's what heroes like Christopher Celiz do. They stand where others can tee. They stay until everyone else is safe. They rescue others, even when it costs them everything. Epilogue. The echo of valor. Valor doesn't always come with a battle cry. Sometimes it looks like a man standing alone in the open, facing a storm of bullets, not for glory, but for the people who still needed him. Sergeant First Class Christopher Celiz didn't die because he made a mistake. He died because he made a choice, the kind of choice that defines every true soldier. When the Black Hawk lifted from that dusty field, his body fell, but his purpose didn't tee. Every beat of the rotor, every life on board, was a heartbeat borrowed from his courage. His name is now etched among heroes on memorial walls, in Medal of Honor citations, in the hearts of those who still wear the uniform. But his story belongs to all of us. Because heroism isn't just what you do in the moment, it's what echoes after you're gone. It's the silence that follows courage, and the lives that keep breathing because someone else stopped. So when his daughter asks someday who her father was, they'll tell her. He was the man who stood where no one else could, who faced fire so others could live, and who never came home but never truly left. Stay healthy, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. If you know another untold story of courage, share it in the comments below. Your voice helps keep their memory alive.